We're joined with a special guest today, Dr. Ben Carson, HUD Secretary. Thank you for joining us. We've interviewed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. They've both said they will stay on as long as President Trump wants them to stay on. Would you stay on at least till the end of the first term and maybe into a possible second?
Yeah, I have no intention of leaving. I was asked that question some weeks ago, and I said my preference would be to be in private life again. That doesn't mean that I'm leaving. I'm just telling you what my preference is. I see this as something that needs to be done, and therefore will be here as long as it takes to turn this ship around.
But definitely until the end of the first term?
Definitely.
Definitely. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. How often do you talk to the president? I know you obviously ran against him. Then you were partners. How often do you talk to him now?
We talk frequently. And he's a very different person than a lot of people might perceive, depending on which news outlets they look at.
What do people not know about the president that you do?
He has a wonderful sense of humor. And he cares deeply about people. I was having a recent conversation with him, for instance, about Puerto Rico. He was saying, we have to make sure that the aid gets to the actual people. It is so essential that we do that, particularly given the history there.
This week, you had a contentious hearing on Capitol Hill before a House committee where Democratic lawmakers were kind of testing you on acronyms and asking you yes or no questions.
REO rates. Do you know what an REO is?
An Oreo?
No, not an Oreo. An REO. REO.
Real estate?
What's the O stand for?
Organization?
Owned. Real estate owned. That's what happens when a property goes to foreclosure. We call it an REO.
Do you think that they went too far in that hearing?
Well, some of them don't. I don't think they can actually help it. But at some point, I'm hoping that people begin to recognize what their responsibility is, particularly as legislators. It's not gotcha moments and just acting silly and confrontational and trying to get your moment in the spotlight. It's actually trying to solve the problems. And that was one of the big points that I was trying to make during that hearing. If there's something that you don't like about what's going on with immigration policies, you're the legislative body, you have the ability to change that. Asking me as the HUD Secretary to violate the law is not the way that you do that.
So do you think they were playing gotcha? You were asked about REOs and then you tweeted later about Oreos to Congresswoman Katie Porter. Are you willing to meet with her and talk these things out maybe behind closed doors without the cameras?
Well, one of the reasons that I told her I would like for her to meet with our people is because, she was a subject matter expert in that, 10 or 15 years ago. And at that time, we did have a lot of REO, properties. We had like over 65,000 of them. Now we have only about 6,500, and we do everything we can to keep families who are affected from foreclosure. That's why the number is down so low. And, I think that she obviously is thinking about the way things used to be and has no idea about what's going on now. So that's what she needs to talk about. And, she asked me what the O is. We throw around, acronyms all the times, particularly in government, and you don't really even think about what do the letters mean, but you know what the thing is. Of course you know what an REO is. Of course you know what the foreclosure portfolio is. But they try to take those moments to ridicule people because they've probably read Saul Alinsky's book and they know that's one of the rules. That it's just so silly. And I just hope for the sake of our young people and for the sake of our nation in general that we can move beyond the silliness and actually begin to address the problems that affect us.
You were asked about HUD's plan to remove people who are in the U.S. illegally evicting. This could be a large amount of people, including children. What's the rationale behind that?
The rationale is that it's the law. The law very specifically states, Section 214, of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1980. It says the HUD Secretary is is prohibited from providing housing assistance to people who are in the country illegally. It further states that if it is discovered that the homeowner or the apartment leasee is harboring people who are illegal, the HUD Secretary has a duty to remove them. So if they don't like that, it's the law, they need to change that.
They could change the law.
But here's what I find fascinating. They're talking about evicting children. We've made a provision that people can get a 6-month deferral on action, and that can be renewed twice. That's 18 months. That's enough time for them to actually do something. Why not address the issue? Again, I go back to the root cause rather than dealing with the symptoms, so that we don't have that problem, we don't have the DACA problem, we don't have a whole slew of problems continue to come up.
But to be clear, the prior administrations were just not enforcing the law, and you're going to enforce the law.
That's correct.
Okay.
Whenever I find a law that's not being enforced, I'm going to enforce it, because if we get in the habit of picking and choosing which laws we want to enforce, eventually that leads us to chaos. I also have to add this. I just find it a little hypocritical when people, try to throw up to you, you're being cruel to children. And they're the same people who don't mind killing babies right up until the time they're born. And as a pediatric neurosurgeon who spent, countless hours trying to save little children's lives, the hypocrisy of that, to me, is beyond belief.
You mentioned your time at HUD and how you're liking the job. What are your overarching goals? Where do you want to? Do you have tangible goals? Okay, by the end of this year, 2020, I want to do X, Y, and Z.
Well, the overarching goal is to change the organization from one that is happy with how many people it can get into its programs and into its buildings, to one who counts success as how many you can get out of the programs and out of the buildings with a successful outcome. That's what we're really looking to do. That's why we designed the Envision Centers. That's why we're emphasizing the family self-sufficiency programs and doing the kinds of things that will give people the opportunities, removing those disincentives that I talked about before that kept people mired in dependency.
Last question on GSCs. OMB released a plan on GSCs. Does HUD support that plan, and do you think that legislation can actually move? Because it would have to be bipartisan. Well,
we're working very hard on housing finance reform. One of the biggest portions of that, obviously, is getting the GSCs out of conservatorship. I mean, it's been going on for more than 10 years, and it does expose the taxpayers more than they should be. And so, yes, I like the idea of getting them out. I like the idea of bringing more private capital in and letting that be a backstop with maybe a government as a secondary backstop. Those things make sense.
Dr. Carson, thanks for joining us today.
Okay, my pleasure.